Hey cats, it's Ed Midsole Bud here with a anticipated review for the Asics Novablast 5. This is one of those daily shoes that everybody seems to love and it just fits into so many different categories. Let's get you my initial review. Thanks for tuning in, people, always appreciated. Hit that subscribe button if you've not done so already, and give this video a thumbs up like too. Drop us a comment to help with the YouTube algorithm. Dankeschön. Asics have thrown me a pair of these for review, but they're not paying me to make this video, nor will they get to vet my views before my valued viewers get to see them. About 15 miles of testing so far, so that's about 24 kilometers. I've got a UK size 11, US size 12 here. I would suggest that the Novablast 5 does run perhaps a half size long. So if you want a slightly more kind of race-like fit, go a half size down. Just a little bit more toe box room here than in a few other models. I think this one's actually quite similar now to the length in terms of the Superblast 2. My pair weighs 303 grams, so that's about 10.7 ounces I think. Approximate heel stack back here of 44 millimeters, and up front I've got about 36. So it's an 8mm drop that ties in with what we've got on the Asics website, though it does seem to have a little bit more stack than they're letting on. Now I think the Novablast 4 came in at about 296 grams or 10.4 ounces, so it's very slightly heavier, though I think you'd need a very sensitive foot to be able to detect the weight difference between these two. It's a marginal increase, and I think I put it down a little bit to manufacturing tolerance. Now, this version of the Novablast is much softer than the previous ones. In fact, if anything, it reminds me of the first version of the shoe. I've got a Sure A score here of 22 for the Flight Foam Blast Max material in the midsole. It's a very, very squashy type of midsole this time around, straight out of the box. I think I've also got slightly more surface area here in terms of the midsole. In the forefoot, about 12.3 centimeters, and back in the heel, 9.6. So it's very slightly wider than the last version, but not by a lot. With the Novablast, you always get a little bit more kind of width and depth, a little bit more height to the toe box. So I think it'll work for a variety of different foot sizes. Quick smell test for you. This is one I'm going to bring back due to viewer demand. Not hugely odorous, this one, has to be said. Subtle odour there of foam. We've got rubber, slightly like Mole Valley Farmers. You always get a slight note of that with Asics shoes. Okay, we're going for the upper first. Upper-wise, it's kind of like a mesh material this time round. I do like it a lot more than the V4. It's a bit more structured, it's more fitting, and this heel area here very reminiscent of that V4 in terms of like the shape and the padding that we've got. The observant of you will notice we've got a new lacing system here. The first couple of eyelets are actually these lace loops. Now, I'm not typically a big fan of lace loops in terms of the eyelet chain, but it really does work here. It allows for a little bit more grip down around the foot. I feel like my foot is kind of latched onto the midsole much better in this version of the Novablast. Everything seems to be working together a bit more, and believe me, you do need this with the midsole that we've got here. Lacing here is spot on. I found that the best lockdown I could achieve with the shoe was actually by lacing all the way up to the final eyelets and then just tying a standard bow. I've not needed to use a runner's knot in this one, and that is the same in the Superblast 2 as well. In fact, there's quite a few similarities between this and that shoe. I managed to get a great lockdown, and there's a really good feel over the top of the foot here. In fact, if you like using a slightly thicker sock, or you want a little bit more width up front, I think the Novablast 5 might be spot on if you go true to size. Perhaps if you're using toe socks as well, I think you might be able to get a really great feel there. It won't be too constrictive around the front of the foot. Lace length is also spot on. Asics seem to have got it just right. I really love the colorway of this one too. It really stands out. It's called Greyish Purple and Coral Reef. The profile of the Novablast model's been top really over the last 2 or 3 versions, and I think they've really hit the spot this time. They kind of mastered it. The tongue's nicely padded. They haven't gone too over the top. It doesn't feel like there's loads of material over the top of the foot, and the tongue is partially gusseted as well. I didn't get any sort of tongue slide across to the side of the shoe. The only things I don't really like about the upper are the fact we got this pull tab here and this very strange long one on the tongue. It's just kind of unnecessary. I don't ever use these things really, aside perhaps from the Alpha Fly 3. So upper-wise, that's the only detractor really. They could have got rid of that and shaved off a few grams. It certainly looks the part and it performs. I'm going to give the Novablast 5 a 2.9 out of 3 for the upper so far. Midsole.
Midsole now.
Midsole-wise, if you liked the last version of the Novablast, then this is quite a change. Much more compressive, to the point actually on the first run of it feeling a little bit unstable. I was wondering what was happening really. My ankles were kind of engaging in a certain way that just wasn't natural. There's certainly parts of them that were being put into action that aren't normally used, though that did seem to drift away over the course of the run. And my other runs in the shoe have been really great. Lovely, nice cushion. Really good impact protection here in the Novablast 5. There's a nice forgiving feel about this Flight Foam Blast Max material. I want more. I like the drop and I like the inclusion of the classic Novablast midsole trampoline. They're going to cut out a section here in the heel. It does help you to fly forwards when you want to. This midsole is certainly the softest we've had in a Novablast since the V1. We're back to a more malleable formula this time round. It's certainly one of the softest foams that I've tried out on the channel over the last few years. A Shore A22 is, well, it's like a bed. Before you ask, no, it doesn't feel anything like the Superblast 2 really. It's by far squashier out the box, whereas the Superblast 2 takes a little bit of time to bed in. I wouldn't say it's got the same hollow sort of feel as that shoe. At times, in fact, I thought this one felt a little bit like the Invincible run from Nike, but without the bulbous weight of that swoosh offering. I think that's the closest shoe to anything really that I could come up with in terms of comparison. This one responds incredibly well over different paces. Doesn't feel like you're kind of locked in to running at a specific speed. I think this one could be a fantastic daily shoe for lots of people. You can go up through the gears really easily. There's no plate here for stabilization. That might limit the use of it somewhat for very specific sort of longer duration intervals perhaps, but as a daily blaster, the 5 is really well positioned. There's nice forefoot width here and a little bit more in the heel than some of its daily rivals, and when you compare this foam up against like Cushlon 3.0 or React X, there is no comparison. This comes out as an easy winner. It's a really big improvement in terms of foam, and they've shifted this shoe into like a higher scale for me, into a new realm. A really big improvement over the V4. As a daily driver, I mean, it's a absolute banger midsole wise. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 3 so far for the midsole. Outsole wise, well, there had to be a couple of negative points. There's a very soft formula rubber used here on the Novablast 5. There are some ridges here in the heel and the forefoot, but sadly I found the grip was a little bit lacking on anything that was very wet or smooth, and there's lots of those sorts of terrains around at the moment. Lots of surfaces that have either got sort of icy patches on or some very slick mud. If you're running on roads where it's fairly debris free, or you're on some concrete pavement, then you should be absolutely fine here. Just be a little bit careful in the wet. That was probably one of the detractors from the V4. I just wish we had a similar outsole here to what we've got on the Superblast 2, because that's got a little bit more of a pattern. It's a slightly coarser sort of feel going around corners. On dry areas there wasn't a problem, just a lack of pattern here, and the rubber's very soft. I do wonder how it's going to hold up. I mean, a Shore A score of 54 here. I think I've actually tested a couple of midsole foams that are higher than that, so do bear that in mind. Just the smooth rubber here seems a bit of an odd choice. Maybe they're going to launch like a Novablast 5 Trail or like a weatherized version with like a little bit more traction here. But it's a bit of a weird choice considering that we're heading into the winter and that's what people want from their running shoe, right? So I'm going to give it a 2.7 out of 3 for outsole. The only minor letdown so far, really. value now. I think at 135 quid for this one, if you can't get hold of the Superblast 2, which is probably likely, it's got a slightly more minimal stack. I think it's a total banger. Already one of my top recommendations for 2024. Very exciting, usable shoe. Got quite a few miles in already, and I just want to run in it again right now, holding it in hand. I think for a daily shoe, it's got almost everything you want, really, with a additional softness that we haven't had before. It really puts shoes like the Pegasus 41 to the sword. Such a fun shoe to run in, and it's hard to sort of recommend anything else over this one right now. They've got the formula just right. Bit more cushioned than the Pegasus Plus, and more responsive too, with the newly utilised Flight Foam Blast Max foam. I can see many people picking these up for runs, and also for lifestyle and leisure purposes too, because they look the part. Asics got the blend just right, and you can't fault them on build quality either. Always out the box, they seem to be a little bit better than everything else. There's no dodgy glue marks or pieces hanging off. The stitching's good. My pair pretty much pristine out the box. In fact, I got them out of the box and got straight out there to use them. So 135 quid, this is 30 quid cheaper than the Pegasus Plus over here in the UK. It's a touch more expensive than the Pegasus 41, but it's way more fun than that shoe. 15 quid more than the Puma Velocity Nitro 3, but far less dense and quite a bit lighter. Perhaps only the SL2 from Adidas is up for comparison, though the outsole and insole choices on the SL2, as well as those dodgy laces, meant that that shoe wasn't perfect, though it is at a slightly cheaper price than the Novablast 5. Kind of hard to fault this one really, aside from those weird pull tabs and improving the wet grip. I might even get the sandpaper out and see if I can make it a little bit more coarse down here. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 3 for value. At this price, I think it's pretty good. If I've totaled the scores up correctly, that gives us 11.6 out of 12 for my initial review on the Asics Novablast 5. Easily the best Novablast yet. Looks the part and performs too. Let me know if you're going to be picking up a pair of these when they drop very soon down in the comments. Quick musical interlude for you. It's actually a concert review, I suppose. I recently went down to Lyme Regis with Dale Fender to check out a Buddy Holly tribute act. They're called Buddy Holly and the Cricketers. Now, sometimes tribute acts can fall a little bit foul of spending a bit too much time, you know, reminiscing and being sort of sentimental, but this act was fantastic. It's all young guys and they're all masters at their instruments. Drums, stand-up bass, piano, and 2 guitarists as well. And it's not just Buddy Holly material that these guys knock out either. They've got the full range of rock and roll. Sound was absolutely fantastic, and the range of material was right up my street. It was all that old sort of 50s, 60s rock and roll. You just can't lose, really. Bass player was particularly sensational. He was a real character, and pretty much all the guys can sing as well. They all did a few sort of numbers from various different rock and roll legends. So if you do get a chance to check these guys out in the UK, then I urge you to do so. Buddy Holly and the Cricketers. Thanks for joining me on the channel, people, for the Novablast 5 review today. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. Drop us a comment to help with the algorithm as well. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you